In a land long ago, there lived a man named Jonah. He was known to be wise, and he often spoke with God. Jonah was a prophet, a person who shared God's messages with the people. He listened carefully to what God had to say, and he felt a deep connection to the divine guidance he received. His days were filled with prayer and quiet moments, thinking about the ways of God and the people of his own land. He loved his home and the familiar faces of his community, finding comfort in the routines and traditions that shaped his life. Jonah believed he understood his purpose and was content to serve God within the borders of his own nation, among people he knew and understood. One day, the voice of God came to Jonah with a new and challenging command. God asked him to travel to the great city of Nineveh. The people of Nineveh were not like Jonah's people. Their ways were wicked, and their hearts had grown hard. God wanted Jonah to go there and deliver a very serious warning. He was to tell them that their city would be destroyed in 40 days if they did not turn away from their evil deeds. This message was meant to give them a chance to change, a chance to seek forgiveness and start anew. It was a heavy burden to carry, a message of doom mixed with a sliver of hope. Jonah was filled with a great and overwhelming fear. The city of Nineveh was large and powerful, and its people were known for their cruelty. He imagined their angry faces and their closed hearts. How could one man stand against an entire city? He was scared they would not listen to him, that they might harm him for delivering such a terrible message. Instead of trusting in God's plan, Jonah decided to run away. He thought that if he could get far enough away, he could escape God's command. So he went down to the port city of Joppa and found a ship that was sailing to Tarshish, a place in the opposite direction of Nineveh. He paid the fare and boarded the vessel, hoping the vast ocean would hide him from his sacred duty. As the ship pulled away from the shore, Jonah might have felt a brief sense of relief. He went down into the hold of the ship, found a quiet corner, and fell into a deep sleep, exhausted from his fear and his desperate escape. He hoped that the rocking of the waves would carry him far away from his problems, far from the voice of God that called him to a place of danger. But no one can truly run from the presence of God, especially not on the wide, open sea, where God's power is shown in every wave and every gust of wind. As the ship sailed further and further from the land, a mighty storm began to brew. The sky turned dark, and the wind howled with a terrifying force. Great waves crashed against the wooden ship, tossing it back and forth as if it were a small toy. The sailors, who were experienced men of the sea, were filled with terror. They had never seen a storm so fierce and so sudden. They prayed to their own gods, throwing their cargo overboard to lighten the ship, hoping to save it from breaking apart. But the storm only grew stronger, and it seemed as if the sea itself was angry and determined to swallow them whole. The ship's captain, seeing that nothing they did was working, went down below to find Jonah. He woke him and asked, "How can you be sleeping? Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he will have mercy on us and we will not perish." The sailors decided to cast lots, a way of discovering who might be the cause of their misfortune. When they did, the lot fell on Jonah. They all turned to him and asked, "Tell us, who are you? What have you done to bring this disaster upon us?" Jonah knew in his heart that he was the reason for the terrible storm. He could no longer hide from his disobedience. With a heavy heart, Jonah confessed everything to the sailors. "I am a Hebrew," he said, "and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." He told them he was running away from God's command. The sailors were even more afraid when they heard this. "What should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?" they asked. Jonah knew there was only one way to save them. "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he told them. "Then it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." The sailors did not want to do this, but the storm grew worse. Finally, seeing no other choice, the sailors prayed to Jonah's God, asking for forgiveness for what they were about to do. They then lifted Jonah and threw him over the side of the ship into the raging water. Immediately, the wind stopped howling, and the angry waves became calm. The sea was peaceful once more. The sailors were amazed and filled with awe. But as Jonah sank beneath the surface, God sent a great fish, like a giant whale, which swallowed Jonah whole. Jonah was not drowned. He was inside the dark, damp belly of the enormous creature, alive but trapped in the depths of the ocean. For 3 days and 3 nights, Jonah lived inside the great fish. It was a dark and lonely place, surrounded by the sounds of the deep sea. In that strange, watery prison, Jonah had a lot of time to think. He realized he could not escape from God, no matter how far he ran or where he tried to hide. He understood the foolishness of his fear and the seriousness of his disobedience. From the belly of the fish, Jonah began to pray. He thanked God for saving him from drowning in the storm. He promised that if he was given another chance, he would obey God's command and fulfill the vow he had made. God heard Jonah's prayer from the depths of the ocean. After 3 days, God commanded the great fish, and it swam toward the shore. It opened its massive mouth and spat Jonah out onto the dry land. Jonah stood on the beach, wet and amazed to be alive. He was no longer in a place far away, but was near the very city he had tried to avoid. The word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time, saying, "Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you." This time Jonah did not hesitate. He had learned his lesson in a very big way. He got up and started his journey toward Nineveh. Jonah walked through the vast, bustling city, a place filled with more people than he had ever seen. He cried out the message God had given him, his voice echoing through the streets and marketplaces. In 40 days, Nineveh will be overthrown, he declared. He shared his own incredible story of the storm and the great fish, explaining that the same God who had power over the sea was now offering them a chance to change. The people of Nineveh, from the richest to the poorest, listened to Jonah's words. They did not laugh or get angry. Instead, they believed him. They saw the truth in his warning. The king of Nineveh heard the news and was deeply moved. He took off his royal robes, put on sackcloth, and sat in ashes as a sign of his sorrow. He sent out an order to everyone in the city, commanding them to fast and pray to God. "Let everyone give up their evil ways," the king declared. The people of Nineveh turned away from their wickedness and asked God for forgiveness. They showed that their change of heart was real through their actions. They chose a new path, a path of kindness and humility, hoping that God would see them and have mercy. When God saw what the people of Nineveh had done, and how they had truly turned from their evil ways, his heart was filled with compassion. He saw their repentance and decided not to bring about the destruction he had warned them about. God forgave the entire city and gave them a second chance to live in peace and goodness. The 40 days passed, and Nineveh was safe. The city that was once doomed was now saved because its people had listened and changed. God's mercy had triumphed over his judgment, showing that his greatest desire is not to punish, but to forgive and restore. However, Jonah was not happy about this. He became very angry and upset with God. He had traveled all this way and delivered a message of doom, and now the city was spared. He felt that his prophecy had not come true, and that he looked like a fool. He went out of the city and sat down on a hill, waiting to see what would happen. He built a little shelter for himself and watched over Nineveh, still grumpy and resentful. Jonah complained to God, feeling that God was being too kind to people who, in Jonah's opinion, did not deserve such grace and forgiveness. God wanted to teach Jonah one more important lesson. While Jonah sat in the hot sun, God caused a leafy plant to grow up quickly over him, providing cool and welcome shade. Jonah was very happy about the plant. It brought him comfort and relief from the heat, and he was grateful for it. But the very next day, God sent a small worm to eat the plant's stem, and it withered and died. The sun beat down on Jonah's head, and a hot wind began to blow. Jonah became faint and miserable, wishing he could just give up. He was deeply upset about losing the plant that had brought him so much comfort. Then God spoke to Jonah gently. "You are concerned about a plant which you did not tend or make grow. It sprang up in a night and died in a night. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and also many animals. Should I not have concern for that great city?" Through this simple plant, God showed Jonah the depth of his compassion. The story of Jonah teaches us that God's love and mercy are for everyone. It reminds us that every person deserves a second chance, and that forgiveness is one of the greatest gifts we can receive.